everybody, to the third session of the Media and Journalism webinars. Jenifer, to present you a very quick overview. This is our fifth year organizing Journalism Emeritus Foundation's Media and Journalism webinars, a fabulous opportunity as we create this yearly alumni of young professionals in media affairs, in journalism. But why I really like this program is that we also have participants from other diverse disciplines. Majority of those are from social sciences, where people are here to improve their skills of communication. And as we all know, creating content is a big skill that is required in almost every sphere of life, including professional life as well. So I'm very happy to receive feedbacks on how beneficial the trainings are to develop young professionals endeavors in their respective areas too. And this year, I'm very happy to let you know that we have participants from 27 different countries. And it's a wonderful, cohesive and inclusive program. So this is our third training session. And in the first two sessions, we covered risk assessment and managing boundaries for journalists covering conflicts, which is also an area that you have a high expertise. And then we moved on with ensuring trust on media, and we on Wednesday spoke on some of the tactics to really overcome the pollution of misinformation and disinformation. Really had a thought-provoking discussion on what is really the role of journalists, and when it is time that we sometimes cross or not and have the head of advocacy in replacement of journalism. So those two sessions were great. I'm pretty sure we will have a very beneficial gathering today as well. So our topic with Jenifer Fenton today is establishing a solid professional foundation and upholding media ethics. I just shared your professional website as well. As for the purposes of editing, I had to cut your biography quite short, but you have an immense experience in media as well. So to formally introduce our trainer today, Jenifer Fenton has been the spokesperson at the United Nations Office of the Special Envoy for Syria since May 2019. Jenifer participates at this initiative in her own personal capacity as a media advisor, but previously she worked for Al Jazeera in Doha, New York, and in CNN in Atlanta, Jerusalem, London, and Abu Dhabi as well, holding senior positions, including as an executive producer. Jenifer Fenton also worked for the UN OCHA in Palestine and UN Refugee Agency in New York as well. So she has 16 years in the television industry, holding variety of senior positions. I think she's the perfect name to deliver this training on how to build a successful career. Particularly, I'm pretty sure our audience today will benefit from your professional expertise on how you build up your career as well, because I know from the comments of many individuals participating in this program that they also have plans to move from their local news agencies, building their career up in global media organizations as well. So Jenifer will keep the session interactive. So please, as always, I would appreciate if you could prioritize using the hand up button if you want the floor for any interventions, or chat is available as always. So over to you, Jenifer. Thank you so much.
Great. I'm so happy to be here. This is so exciting. And it's so great to see so many different locations. As Jenifer said, yes, I've been very fortunate. So I worked for CNN, Al Jazeera in the US, the Middle East, and Europe, and then the UN as well in those countries. And then I was able to study a little bit in Asia. So I'd like to keep this interactive. So today we'll talk about some key topics that I hope can set you up for success and help you navigate some of the world of media and reporting. Obviously, things are changing very quickly. I'll just talk very briefly, hopefully, about setting up a professional foundation for early career building and sort of the right skills, and hopefully developing a strategy that can fit with the demands of whatever media field that you're hoping to go into. This is pretty straightforward. Next, we'll be interactive, looking at ethical media considerations while reporting on human rights, discussing how to report these sensitive issues, both with responsibility and integrity. In this section, I'll start with some questions and examples, and then we can move into considerations when covering conflict and mediation processes. Obviously, reporting on conflict requires a delicate balance of accuracy, sensitivity, and context, posing some questions to you again in this session. And then finally, we'll cover the effectiveness of transparency and news reporting to combat mis and disinformation. And as I noted at the top, if we don't get to everything, please feel free to send questions after. I'm pretty responsive, or try to be. So I'll try to answer as many of them as possible, of course, today. And then, if not today, we'll make sure to get to that. So I'll start with a solid foundation. This sounds very basic, but developing a very strong work ethic and discipline are essential, particularly in news. I'd say punctuality and meeting deadlines is so crucial in journalism. My early start times when I began my career was 3 a.m., which meant 3 a.m., not 3:01, 3:02, because the show would go out live. I used to do a morning show for CNN at 9 a.m., so every minute is crucial. Obviously, striving for accuracy and excellent in everything that you write, no matter the story. Making a mistake on a very small piece of journalism can have the same devastating effects as a larger piece of work. Stay informed, try to regularly read from news sources, various news sources, to stay up to date on current events and trends. Follow prominent journalists and media outlets or niche outlets or others that suit your interest. I say this is important because sometimes for example, I've been asked to write things like the elections in Mongolia or South African elections, or so certain areas of the world I have a lot of expertise in. So I don't need to have a background or continue reading to be able to generate a story very quickly. But other areas of the world, I'm not as well read into. So I try to make sure that I'm just reading across, the headlines of various news outlets, be it BBC, New York Times, or if there are other outlets that are important in your region, to just try to make sure that I tend to follow trends in any area of the world, so that when news breaks, I would be available to handle that news with at least the basics of the situation that is happening. Then I would say skills. In journalism, there are many different skills that you need to advance. So it depends if you want to be a writer, if you want to be on air, if you want to be a producer. So, I'd say obviously seek out the skills that are suited to your interest, but there are so many interests in journalism and skills such as photography or web design. One of the things I chose to do was actually website buildings, which can carry over into other careers should you want to do that. So in addition to public speaking and writing, networking and building relationships, I think for me, is probably the biggest one. On average, even today, I try to connect with 2 or 3 new people a day. So if I see a journalist who works in the region that I cover, I tend to just DM them on Twitter. Sometimes journalists have their emails at the bottom of their reports, or you can find them on LinkedIn. And I basically just say, I like the story that you wrote. If you're available to talk or connect, I would really love that. And then I've just continued to build my database of journalists, editors, industry professionals over the years. I also try to attend journalism conferences. I realize that there can be some financial challenges with that, but any ones that might be available for you in your regions. I join press clubs and engage in other professional networks. I think and also a very big one for me is mentorships. Find experienced media professionals and journalists who can mentor you. You'd be surprised how many people are really willing to give back, depending on the ask that you have. Like Jenifer was just noting, whether it's helping with writing cover letters or taking a look at the first stories that you wrote or giving you some editing ideas. Internships, obviously a great way to grow skills and to figure out what you want. Then I would say when it comes to journalism, obviously communication is essential. So work on your writing and speaking skills. This is something that improves and you have to keep doing it. I try to make sure that I'm writing every day and speaking every day, whether that's just writing in a diary, writing short reflections, writing social media posts about a news story that's relevant to you. or speaking to classes about work that you're doing, but just to make sure that you continue to improve and work on the skills of writing and speaking. This comes more easily to some than others, but conveying information clearly and in a compelling way is obviously crucial. The next I would say is interviewing skills, developing strong interviewing techniques and preparing thoroughly, and then also decide what works best for you in terms of note-taking. I've chosen, I normally always record people with their permission. You know, if I'm speaking to somebody, I note that I prefer to take notes and to record. And I also tend to transcribe people and keep files on my desktop. That allows me to revisit things very quickly. Sometimes I used to do long format reporting on, say, Guantanamo. So I might do an interview in January, but a prisoner might be released in March or April. And having the transcripts of every interview that I had done, you know, would allow me again to generate stories very quickly because I'd already prepared the transcript. Then I would say, you know, set goals, decide, you know, where you want to be in a year, 2 years, and then what it would take you to get there. And then, you know, obviously reflect and update as you go along. I've often set goals for myself, like that I thought I would want to do. And then once I tried a couple of things, I realized that I thought it was really interesting, but it wasn't a skill that I wanted to develop. And then, you know, be prepared to transition. There's lots of different roles in journalism, and I've been very lucky, you know, moving from producing to writing to out in the field to back in a studio. So that again goes to being flexible, which obviously can depend on your personal and family situations. And then I would say definitely in journalism, things fall through all the time. So quick problem solving. You can be out in the field trying to gather a story and, you know, the person you're supposed to interview doesn't show up. So I used to do live television. So I would always think through the show. What happens if this guest doesn't come up? What do I plan to do? Because you kind of have to have thought about it in your head before, because you have to make instant decisions. So in my head, I would be like, oh, if Antonio doesn't make it, I'm going to go to Lena. If Lena's not there, I'm going to go to Chatel. So in my head, I would always be planning if something was going to happen. So when it did happen, I just had to execute it. Then I would say, you know, the biggest things are ethics and integrity, to make sure that you adhere to journalistic ethics, which at its base are accuracy and fairness and impartiality. And then importantly, I would say maintaining a professional image, both in person and online. A lot of that has to do with you know, where you may want to do your reporting. Some areas of the world are more sensitive. So if you're portraying a certain image of yourself online, and if somebody is looking to work with you and they see that and it doesn't align with the work that they're doing, it could cost you a story. So take that into consideration. And then finally, before we move on, and I would just say, you know, cost, really try to understand the budgets of the work that you're trying to do. Working in video is normally much more expensive than working in print. Working in conflict zones is always, or tends to be, more expensive as well, because there can be security considerations, managing finances, particularly if you're a freelancer. And then I would say definitely fair pay. We just had this instant the other day. Ask other people what they're making, and make sure that if you're, you know, don't be afraid to ask other people what they're making for the job that they're doing, what the pay bands are for jobs, to make sure that you're being paid fairly. This information should be provided to you when you start. So I don't know if anybody has questions on sort of just the basics as I see them, and then we can sort of move into what I hope is a more fun bit, which is some sort of the ethical dilemmas that come up or have come up. But anybody have any questions sort of on what I see as sort of the basics of setting a good foundation? I don't see any, so I'll start right into ethics. So, you know, ethics in journalism, there's no right or wrong answer, and a lot of it can depend on the context of the country or the region that you're in, or the network that you work in. So I just start with a question. You know, there are examples, for example, when you could choose to lie or be deceptive to get a story. Does anybody want to think of an example when you might do that, and when a network might allow you to do that?
Glorious has her hand up. Please go ahead.
So the one example I can think of is during an investigative story. So you are trying to find some information that the government or a particular group doesn't want you to find. So you might have to not say that you're a journalist, or maybe record a conversation clandestinely and not specifically be forthcoming about your your stand and your position in that particular environment.
Lena, I think you had your hand raised too, or?
It was similar, but not clandestinely reporting or not saying that you're a journalist, but not outlining in full what your potential in interviewing that person.
Anyone else? In my experience, one of the biggest ones that come up is if you have to be honest when entering a country that restricts media reporting. So, for example, there are a number of countries around the world that don't normally or often don't let journalists in if there are situations in which the country has declared, for example, a national emergency. So people have used, false pretenses to enter the country, entering the country at a profession that could be allowed into the country as a cook, for example. So entering as somebody who's interested in the food and the culture, and then going on to report in the country, or, entering as a tourist visa. I'd say another one that's come up is applying to work somewhere for the purposes of writing about the work practices of the company. So pretending, for example, to be an employee to report on, unethical practices of the company, or joining a group, pretending that you share the same interest as those groups to write about the group. So, obviously we've seen, the growth of the far right in the United States, and things like that. So pretending to be part of a group with no intention or alignment with the group, but to write on the group. So if you were to try to pitch these stories, what sort of things do you think a newsroom might ask you if you wanted to do this? Some considerations when they're weighing whether or not they would let you. I'll tell you one normally is this the only way you can get the information, or is there another way to do it? I think that's, do you need to lie to get into the country? Do you need to go in on a tourist visa? Or is there another way to get the information that you want to get? Who could you be harming in doing a story this way with not revealing that you're a journalist or working as a media? And is any harm that you're bringing to that situation, is it reasonable? So is any harm that your journalism may do, is there a greater good that will come out of it? For example, if people who confided you in a work situation with not knowing that you're there to report about the company, would your reporting on unsafe practices of the company be a greater good than the deception? I think another is who you put at risk, and any investigations that you may be subject to for deceptive practices or the company. So normally the test is sort of, is it sufficiently vital to public interest, an objective sort of, of wrongdoing. Another ethical thing that I think comes up is unidentified or anonymous sources. Does anybody want to throw out sort of the questions that you might get asked if you want to use an anonymous source?
Laiba, if you're available, please take the floor to ask the question, or I can read it out. But if you're available, please unmute yourself.
I see it.
I guess not. Just let me read it out for the audience. Laiba from Pakistan, I assume. According to ethics, you can't challenge the sovereignty of your country, but if in some cases which are creating major problem in your system and your official system is involved, how you will show the truth to your public, which is a primary duty of a journalist?
I think that's a very complex question. I would say, so freedom of expression in general is globally, we're talking, is guaranteed normally under Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and also Article 19 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. So globally, everyone has a right to freedom of opinion and expression. And this obviously includes the right to hold opinions without interference. So freedom of expression is also protected in various treaties, like the European Convention of Human Rights, the American Convention of Human Rights, and the African Charter of Human and People's Rights. But they'll tell you that freedom of expression is not absolute. So international law, again, in general, imposes a clear positive duty. That means states should support freedom of expression, which with limitations, for propaganda or advocacy of hatred or incitement of discrimination, hostility, or violence. So this goes back to, knowing both the laws in your country, defamation laws, as well as what you're trying to achieve. I think that you'll see in some countries, it's much easier to report more freely than others. And whether you want to take those risks, sometimes reporters choose to leave their country and then report about their country more safely from outside of their country. So I don't know if that helped to answer your question, but there is a legal framework that does help protect journalists, but how well it applies in protecting journalists and the stories they do is subject to many different layers. You've seen very high profile cases where journalists have been imprisoned just simply for doing their work. There was a question, I think, Lilina? I can't see it all. So I only see like the first screen. So if somebody's on the second or third screen, I may not see it. So please just feel free to unmute yourself.
I have a couple of questions about vulnerable or anonymous sources. What's the kind of minimum amount of information that you think you should get in order, as the journalist yourself, to verify the source? Obviously, you might not communicate that in the article, but if you were contacted by someone who said, I want to talk about this company, I can tell you my name and I can tell you the malpractice, but I can't tell you the company. How much would you push that? And a second part, how do you explain your role as a journalist to a vulnerable source who might not necessarily want to give up their story?
That's a very good question. So one, I would say in terms of somebody contacting you, and again, I would say that this sort of applies to as well as anonymous sources. How significant is the information that the person is providing you? So that's a starting point. Like, and does this person seem to be the only person that could provide this information? And can the person give you other avenues, right? So does the person have any documents that they can share with you without putting themselves at risk that could help verify their story? Do they have a work ID that they can share with you without, harming themselves? I also think, when people ask about anonymous sources, could the story actually be printed without the source or without the quote? Sometimes, an anonymous source provides a very good quote about context, but it's not essential to the nature of the story. So you have to think, is the quote critical or is it complementary to the story that you're doing? And is there a clear and compelling need to protect the identity of the source? A lot of times we see, government officials speaking because they're not allowed to speak to journalists in their professional positions. So they do so asking for confidentiality. To move on to like another area, I think where we see a lot of conflict ethics raised is the issue of embeds. So gaining access to conflict zones or restricted areas while also trying to maintain editorial independence. Can anybody see how this could be a problem? And how would you perhaps try to rectify it if, say, one of you was going on an embed? Is there something someone else could do to try and make sure that you're providing the audience with a fuller picture as opposed to just one site of a conflict? Can I call on people? Richard, would you be comfortable answering what you think might be a problem with you're just right in my sign of vision below me in the grid. So I thought I would ask, can you see how embeds could pose a problem? If you're comfortable, if you're not comfortable, you could shake your head and I'll move on to someone.
Jenifer?
Yes.
Yes. I feel sometimes it depends on a number of factors. There are several factors that come into play to enable you as a reporter, or let's say to enable the source to express themselves freely to you as a reporter. Key among these factors could be political factors. We all know that there are forces, particularly the political forces that guide nations. And as you have rightly put it earlier on, sometimes sources feel very much, very much afraid, to express themselves before us as a reporter, or to us as reporters for our news, because of the fear of the unknown.
Yes, they don't know how their information might be used. I think that's a very accurate point.
Yes, and these unknown fears most of the times come from above. The authorities above them.
Or they could also, we often see that people fear speaking out because they could put their families at risk, or their loved ones. So they're not just making a decision for themselves, they're making a decision for others. Thank you, that's great. On the embed journalism, I think that we saw that a lot with the Iraq War and the American military context and reporting, how that led to an imbalance in some networks of reporting just about what American and aligned military units were doing in Iraq, as opposed to the effect that those was having on the civilian population. Obviously, embedded journalists might face or could face pressure to present a military perspective favorably, which could lead to biased reporting. Certain ways that I know that news networks have tried to correct this, and journalists as well, or to adjust for this, is to diversify sources. So if you are going to do an embed with one journalist, have another journalist at the network report with information from other sources, local civilians, NGOs, independent observers, analysis, so to make sure that, a combined fashion, that you're providing a more comprehensive view of the situation. Obviously, be transparent with the audience about the nature of the reporting, that you are reporting under these conditions. Often you will have restrictions or limitations imposed by the military. Clearly explain the context of that. I think we've seen that a lot with the reporting out of the Gaza Strip, when the IDF have taken journalists in. The journalists have noted the restrictions under which they're reporting, that often their media is subject to review before they can publish it. They've noted that, the video or the reporting that we've seen has been subject to review, and they noted if it has been changed in any way to reflect that oversight. So I think, it's more striving for balanced coverage, multiple perspective, opposing sides, non-combatants, a broader impact of the conflict, to make sure that you're avoiding a one-sided narrative. Another one that we've seen a lot, I think in particular with this war in Gaza, between Gaza and Israel, is when does a person's right to privacy outweigh the news value? So photos or video capturing private individuals in emotional, embarrassing, or otherwise private situations, do reporters violate the sanctity of what should be a private moment, and when? I thought it was, I don't know how many of you have seen the award-winning photo of the World Press Photo of the Year, which is this very powerful photo of a woman cradling the body of a deceased child in the Gaza Strip. But when they selected the photo, they noted that it was composed with great care and respect. The faces were less visible. There was some distance. And they noted that they felt that, it provided a glimpse into unimaginable loss, and that it was like multi-layered, representing not just the loss of a child, but sort of struggle overall. So I think, when you're taking photographs, you have to remember that, often, or video, you're exposing people in literally their most vulnerable situations, or at times of great loss. So make sure that you're doing it in a way that is respectful of that. In the same context, I think a lot of what we've seen is, how do you report on hostage and terror situations? That's come up, I think, throughout my career, because we had Al-Qaeda, we had 9/11, we had the riots of ISIS and other terrorist groups. We see it now again with hostages. So when do you show hostage footage? When do you not? What are sort of the questions that you ask yourself in doing that? I think the biggest one is, or one of the biggest ones is, how can showing video of hostages or terrorist groups impact the safety of negotiation processes or the people involved, or highlight certain operations that are basically the portrayal of the captors, making sure that you're not providing them with undue publicity or inadvertently aiding in their cause. Can anybody think of any other challenges that might come up in that situation if you're reporting on a hostage situation? No. Okay, I'll give you some of the ones that have come up. Is respecting the privacy and the emotions of the hostage families. The families themselves can have certain wishes, and avoiding any additional stress or harm to the families through invasive or insensitive reporting. Again, weighing that against the news value of the information. Balancing a public's right to know with the need for operational secrecy. So for example, if there's some operation underway and you got wind of it, do you need to report it in real time, or can you report it after the operation has concluded? So, news organizations often choose to refrain from sharing information that could compromise rescue operations or negotiation strategies. I think that's one that's come up throughout my career, and there's no right or wrong answer. It's just weighing information against the news value of it. So just to sort of, I guess, review then what I think like ethical things, and to recap some of the questions that come up in considering ethical, accuracy and fact checking. So ensuring all the information is accurate and well sourced, relying on credible sources and cross-verifying things. To the point that was made earlier, I would say number 2 is sensitivity and respect. Respect victims, treat victims and survivors with sensitivity, particularly to their trauma. So avoid sensationalizing their suffering. Consent, obtain informed consent from people that you're interviewing, especially those who are vulnerable to trauma. Make sure they understand how their information will be used. If you're interviewing somebody in a conflict situation, make sure that they know that this video will go out in print or it'll go out in video, that their face will be on screen. Does that put people at risk? This is particularly pertinent if there's a minor involved, a child, that the proper consent is sought from authorities overseeing that child. What came up as well earlier, anonymity and confidentiality, protecting the identities of victims and witnesses where necessary. This is often required by law in certain countries, in particular for victims of sexual abuse. Safeguarding confidential information. I would say the biggest one is avoiding harm. Be mindful of the potential consequences of your reporting. So think about, if you're reporting on a young girl who was going to school in Afghanistan and then decided to continue homeschooling, if you name her or name the village in which she lives, could you be exposing her to further risk? And if there are ways to mitigate that, and if it's even necessary at all for news value. Consider the context and impact of the stories that you do. Impartiality and balance, objective reporting. And by objective reporting, I mean, the facts often speak for themselves, and you can present multiple perspectives and provide balanced coverage. Try to avoid advocacy unless that is what you were trying to do and you want to work for an advocacy organization. While highlighting injustices, try not to cross over into the line of advocacy. Cultural sensitivity, make sure you understand cultural sensitivity. There are different cultural, social, and political contexts, I think, in just about every country. And then obviously use appropriate language and respectful and cultural terms, particularly to avoid derogatory or offensive terms. Accountability and mistakes, mistakes happen. If errors are made, just correct them promptly and transparently. Say why the error happened if you can. In my case before, definitely during live video, we've aired the wrong footage during a segment. We've just corrected it. We said, apologies, we were meant to show you this video, and we bring that to you now. We've said it before, avoid sensationalism and exploitation of human suffering, and try to provide context to human rights violations, which means the underlying causes, as well as potential solutions. And then ethical, as I just mentioned before, ethical use of imagery. So footage that respects the dignity of those affected, avoiding graphic or distressing images. I say that, but of course there's always, exceptions to the rule. There are times when news organizations feel that it's absolutely necessary to show graphic and distressing images so that viewers understand the gravity of the situation. But then again, make sure that these are used with appropriate context that accurately reflect the situation. And then, which came up before, be really aware of relevant laws in whatever country that you're working. Every country, well, I shouldn't say every, but most countries have different laws regarding defamation and privacy. So whether or not you can report on a private individual versus a public individual, and do they have different protections under the law? Anything related to national security, especially in conflict zones or authoritarian and repressive regimes, can have very strict cyber laws. So anything you put out over the internet, including on social media sites, could actually be a violation of the cyber laws. And then particularly election laws. Most countries have very strict rules related to election coverage, and then coverage of terrorism, in particular investigation, trials. So make sure that you know the jurisprudence and practices relating to many of these issues, including slander and respect for dignity and privacy, and also laws relating to hate speech and the rights to imagery. And then lastly, I would just say it's really great if you can to collaborate with human rights organizations or others. So NGOs that are sort of working in the country or have particular insights into situations that you're working on. Consulting with experts or consulting with people that use large data sets to try and incorporate data and research finding. So those are sort of some of the ethical considerations. I see that there's a question about riots. Riots that overwhelmed the talk. Is this?
Amanpreet, if you're available, please join the discussion. If not, I also can read it out. In the meantime, I just want to share a couple reflections, Jenifer. I think the ethical standards that you underlined in terms of hostages really applies to political prisoners as well, or prisoners of conscience, because in authoritarian countries or countries where the regime is tending towards more restrictive legislations and measures, we in terms of with the head of advocacy, surely not journalism, but we try to raise some social awareness and push authorities to apply rule of law to protect right of prisoners to access health services, for example, or if there is a case of ill treatment or torture or whatever. I also witnessed many of the obstacles that you underlined, even raising awareness in the field of human rights advocacy. We must be extra cautious to apply these standards, because sometimes families, we aim to do these sort of advocacy actions with the goal to improve the conditions over there, but families may be offended, or they may not know other intimate members of their circles to know about the situation, or there might even be some other sensitive areas that we have no idea of going on behind the scenes. So it's a very, very alarming situation that we should be considerate of all and every single every single item in such reporting. And I also want to ask your opinion, and I'll give the floor to Lena then. You also underlined the importance of not to abuse, or maybe being considerate of how your reporting is touching on the sensibility of the story. But on the other hand, when the human rights violations are increasing in number in particular countries, while doing human rights reporting, I think it's also important to focus on the stories as well, because from some point onwards, we are speaking of thousands, 10,000s, then wrapping up to 100,000s in prisons particularly. So where do you see this line of appealing to audiences to raise awareness, but also not to abuse the stories of individuals, or not to cross the line of analysis into manipulating individuals' sensitive feelings.
So
where should we set the boundary?
I agree with all that. I think one is always the news value of what you're doing, right? Does the particular story add to, the news value, or is it just purely for the sake of sensation? Does it have to be done then? So if there is a victim, do you need to speak to them in the minute after their trauma? Sometimes the answer may be yes. Like you want immediate information after, a building was targeted by an airstrike. Sometimes it's no. Sometimes you're doing a longer investigative piece. You can find out how to contact that person later, give them a moment to grieve or to do whatever is necessary to protect themselves. So I think this is a very individual question, right? But I think it goes back to the point that Richard was making earlier as well, to make sure that the person is actually giving their informed consent for you to be reporting on them. Often that's not possible. We've seen that when there are large migration flows and very dangerous situations, ships capsizing, people flooding across borders, where it's not possible to ask every individual person for their consent, but also to be mindful of the images that you are showing. Could they put people at risk? We've seen this of women who are trafficked for sexual reasons. And if it became known to their families or others back home, if that information came publicly, you could be putting them at further risk. So it's more to just be mindful and take a moment to reflect, even in 24-hour news. You don't often have to do something right away. You can wait a minute. You can also just describe a scene live on television without going into what is happening or what you think the motivations or something in real time. Often, when we see an event happening live on television, you'll hear the reporters just literally describing the scene, what they're seeing, without going into analyzing who did it or what their motivations for, just to make sure that you're accurate and weighing, the need to know right now with accuracy. I don't know if that answered your question. I think it's very difficult. And I think it's one of these things that is a case-by-case basis.
Conditional.
Yeah. And also to, again, going to the risk that you could be putting yourself in, your team in, and the people in. I see there's a question from, I don't want to mess up your name, Amanpreet, if you wanted to unmute yourself. Otherwise I could just read your question and then try to answer it. It's about the Bombay riots, and the TV news channels were said to be obstructing the rescue of hostages from the Taj Hotel and kept disclosing the strategy of the police and unknowingly warning terrorists. We've seen this, I think, multiple times where that has happened. I think news organizations, for the most part, have tried to make sure that they are prioritizing the protection of civilians. So, if civilians are in a particular area, that the reporting doesn't do harm to them. Certain countries and situations will put a block on that. You've seen that in parts of the US, for example. They won't allow aerial photography of a situation or helicopter cameras. Sometimes they do. It's, again, case by case, hopefully centering civilians who may be impacted by that. Ahmed, I see a question from you. A suicide attack and bombing in Afghanistan. You're basically saying we're continuing, and I can't see where you are dialing in from.
As I remember, she's also from Afghanistan.
Okay, we are currently facing censorship from government and establishment. You can't report facts and corruption of government officials openly due to continuous threats, because the government is arresting some people that are questioning the integrity of the government. What can we do in cases, and how can we be unbiased in reporting? This is a very challenging question. I know that Tolo TV has trained journalists outside the country and tried to set up or have worked with Afghans. So I can try to get you. I think that's one of these things where you have to balance your own protection as a journalist with the information that you're putting into the public domain? Is there a way to do it more safely? If not, are you willing to take those risks? And are the people that you are reporting on or about also willing to take those risks and to consider who you could be putting at harm? Are there other ways that you could get that information out? For example, could you talk to NGOs who publish, who work outside the country, and you could provide your testimony to them without your name, and then they could publish the material that you've given them? So, trying to balance if you can get the information out there in a safe way and what risk you're willing to open yourself up to, as well as other people. I think it's a very challenging context. I see, Lena, you have your hand up again. Don't know if it's an old hand or if you had another question.
In your experience, when you've been placed in countries where there's low trust in the press or in authority in general, what do you say as a foreign correspondent to civilians or to victims to help them understand that your coverage will benefit them?
I think that's very challenging. And again, I think it's a case-by-case basis. And if I think it's just very challenging. But in general, for example, when I worked for Al Jazeera, working for Al Jazeera in the Middle East didn't require that same explanation of what the network is. Most people in the Middle East had an understanding of Al Jazeera and its mandate. When I was working for Al Jazeera in the United States, there was a great perception that Al Jazeera was inherently biased, was propagating harmful information. So I would just often, I wouldn't say often, but sometimes people didn't want to speak to you because of what they thought the channel represented or did not represent. So, I would do my best to them to explain what the ethos were of the channel. No reporting body is entirely perfect, but, and in general, just try to encourage them to watch. I think, people that don't have a particular aptitude towards certain networks or styles can be very challenging. And trust in journalism, there have obviously been a lot of challenges with that in recent years. We've seen it in the United States as well around the elections. I think it can be a challenge, and I don't know that there's any great solution except to try and allow your work to speak for itself. Mujtaba, I don't know if I said your name correctly.
Yes, it's Mujtaba. Can you hear
Hi.
me, guys?
Yes, perfectly.
Yeah. My question is because I'm a documentary filmmaker. Sometimes, for example, if we are documenting marginalized communities, it is important for us to document them, to record that visuals with consent or or without consent, because it really speaks for themselves. Some of the visuals, like for example, a very skinny old woman breastfeeding her children, and they are about to die of hunger. And for the filmmakers, these are visuals to show the world. But I think, like, as a documentary filmmaker, if we take account the media ethics in particular, like the way you said, the consent things, I agree these things are very important. But if we really look up to media ethics, I think there are a lot of visuals that we would not be able to show the world then. So in that type of situation, what we could do?
Well, great, the work that you're doing. I would say one is also can you film people or show people in a more sensitive way? So for example, if you're filming victims of human trafficking, can you film them from behind so their faces aren't identifiable? We often see people's faces blurred, or you see, an interview being conducted where you can hear their voice, but you're not seeing their faces. You're just seeing their body. Now, you said that sometimes you feel like those images could be necessary to convey to the world the severity of the situation. I mean, I think that's a decision that individual journalists and news organizations often weigh, if you think that such images are necessary to convey. I mean, we've seen horrific images, from around the world of starvation and war and conflict impacting civilians. So again, I just make sure that, hopefully your efforts are working towards, portraying a situation accurately and not sensationalizing it. Just because we've been talking about conflict a bit and just conscious of time, I just want to talk about mediation processes and things that are slightly different there. I would say when we talk about mediation processes, so mediation processes is basically an effort to try to end a conflict where different parties to the conflict are engaging with the mediator to try to resolve that. And to move a population or a country out of conflict. So, you know, we've seen during mediation processes, sometimes disclosing the location of the meetings could jeopardize the safety of negotiators and observers. So journalists sometimes have not shared such sensitive operational detail while reporting on the story. You've also seen when you saw the peace talks that were occurring between the Taliban and the Afghan government prior, you know, there were a lot of media outlets that chose to focus on substantive issues rather than the personalities involved of the process. There's no right or wrong to that, just making a decision about what you're trying to advance as a journalist. I think it's also very challenging to try to make sure that you're avoiding propaganda. There are many different sides in conflicts. In Syria, for example, there are 6 foreign armies that operate inside Syria, as well as the government of Syria opposition groups and Security Council listed terrorist groups. So make sure that you're being vigilant to avoid being used as a mouthpiece for any one side, and focus instead on verifying facts and balanced reporting. I think it's always important to provide context. So in addition to what may be happening in the moment, what is the historical, the political, or the social context that can help the audience understand the root causes and the complexity of the conflict? Explaining mediation, like what is the mediation process? What is the role of the various parties? What are the objectives of the various parties in a conflict? Obviously, you know, warring parties can have different objectives and challenges. Non-interference, so being mindful of the actions that you're reporting could interfere with mediation efforts or exacerbating a conflict. And if you are taking actions that do that you make sure you're mindful of the impact that your reporting can have. Also to, you know, the degree to which your journalism can help support peace while maintaining independence. You know, be aware of how your reporting can influence public opinion and support for a peaceful resolution. I think to Jemra's point earlier, fostering sort of empathy for personal stories to foster understanding among communities and across the world. I think long-term perspective and follow-up reporting can be very helpful. So to track the progress of mediation efforts, long-term impacts of conflict, highlighting stories also of resilience. So what is often called like solution journalism, highlighting stories of resilience or peace building efforts or successful mediation outcomes. So I just saw another question in the chat. I don't know. And Tasneen has a question. I don't know if you can unmute yourself or if you need me to read that given your connectivity. I'll read it for you. Just noting in Pakistan that there's the clear polarization of journalism, that half of them support one party and the other half support the other party. Yes, there is a polarization of the media, but the journalists are trying to normalize it in society in the name of freedom of the speech. Is that ethically correct? I would say, I mean, I would trust that you're much more familiar with the Pakistan context than I am. I would say, you know, the role of the journalist is obviously not to align themselves with one party or another, but to report accurately on the party. What is the party platform? What does the party hope to accomplish? Who are the leaders of the party? How do they say that they are going to rule if elected? How are they ruling if they're correct, elected? So, you know, also to, you know, maintaining any access to politicians, making sure that doesn't impact on your reporting. I see Ira from Pakistan. I don't know if you can unmute or if you need me to read that one as well, given connectivity. Artificial intelligence, yeah. That's it. So I just see, how is artificial intelligence impacting the manipulation of journalism and news? That's very interesting. I think it's evolving. There were some discussions actually this week here at the on the side of the UN about information, looking at both the positive and negative aspects of artificial intelligence and the different role that it's taking. whether it is performing a news function. So if you could tell artificial intelligence basically to write a short headline based on these facts, but that's very different from artificial intelligence being able to go on the ground and to get, firsthand sources about something that's happening in real time. The other thing that they noted that artificial intelligence is being used for is distribution. So how to make sure that stories that are being written are then sent to, amplified to various audiences more impactfully. So I think artificial intelligence is the same thing. They've noted some of the same trends that we've seen with early social media reporting. It can be both, used for good, or we can see very detrimental effects. And that could depend on any regulation that comes about as well. I think when we look at sort of some examples, if we move now into, since you just raised artificial intelligence, we can move into our last segment, which is looking at sort of disinformation and misinformation. Maria Ressa, who is one of the leaders and the Nobel laureate on this, for context, during the 2016 presidential election in the Philippines, Maria Ressa and her team at Rappler documented how social media platforms, in particular Facebook, were being used to manipulate public opinion and spread disinformation. And she's noted how they observed coordinated campaigns involving fake accounts and bots that spread false news and attacked critics of candidates. And this led obviously to the spread of misleading information, which could affect reporting. I think we've also all seen a great level of disinformation around the COVID-19 pandemic. There was a huge surge in disinformation globally. False information about cures and vaccines and the virus's origin, and disinformation campaigns that were politically motivated or aimed at sowing confusion and distrust in public health measures and authorities. I don't know if anybody has any recent examples from their own countries of disinformation campaigns. We often see them around elections or other national interest. Lena?
Here, the furthest right party, Dansk Folkeparti, made like a deepfake video of the Prime Minister making an announcement that she was doing away with all the national days and was going to replace them with Eid al-Fitr, and that would be the only national day. And it was badly done, but it's the first time that someone has deepfaked the Prime Minister and then disseminated it on Twitter, and it did end up, even though no one was really duped by it, lead public opinion.
Oh, wow. I saw someone else's hand go up. I don't know if it, Mushtaba? Again, apologies.
Yes, it was me.
Yeah.
No, that's okay. Well, yeah, here in Pakistan, sadly, the intelligence agencies used to do this. Again, like Lena Hunter says, like the deepfake videos of the political leaders. We have a very prominent intelligence agency called ISI that used to do the deepfake videos, and the misinformation is also spread by our prominent journalists. Like Tasneem was commenting that in Pakistan, there is she said that journalists support a political party. In Pakistan, most of the journalists are not doing any journalism. They are supporting one party or another. So, yep, the misinformation is spread by the journalist community themselves and the intelligence agencies here, because in Pakistan, there is authoritarian rule right now. There's no democracy here.
It's a very challenging context to work in. One of the trends that's been noted in the Middle East is fake audio messages. So to Lena's point is, there is a sense that people sort of in certain parts of the world have become more attuned to be skeptical of images and videos, just with the sharing of videos since 2011 onward, that people have become skeptical of believing that that really is the attack, or that really is the crash, or whereas we haven't become as attuned to listening to audio messages. So taking voices of prominent persons and having artificial intelligence manipulate them into recorded audio that can be shared on WhatsApp, which is then also too, depending on whether or not the space is closed or open, it can be difficult to sort of debunk that stuff because it's not in the public domain. So it can spread rapidly. I see two questions. Fenton, I don't know if you can unmute and ask your question or if you want me to read it for you. And then Angela as well. I see, Angela, you said that Kenya misinformation is happening during campaigning and during picketing. I think elections, it's a big year for global elections. It's been a challenging time for journalists and information. Fenton, I don't know if I'm saying your name correctly. I'll give you a minute to unmute, and if not, I'll just go ahead and read the question. You're basically saying from the, go ahead.
Hello, Jenifer and Eric colleague. So writing you from Congo, but I'm based in France and sometimes here in Congo. I'm in Goma, the town near this region where the government has banned all journalists to go to cover topics from the area which is occupied by M23 rebels. And we had a colleague who accessed the area, who get information, especially video from local source. And then when they publish their news or their investigation saying that government said that rebels commit a massacre of civilians in this village, but we go there and we found, for example, 10 deaths inside of 100 deaths, and as said by the government, when they are published those news, government say those people are collaborating with rebels. Someone was jailed, and some of our colleagues just leave the country because they publish facts from the ground, which has like contradiction with the official statement from the government. So my question was, how can journalists deal with those kind of challenge?
Actually, first off, really amazing that you're doing this work. Just yesterday in the Security Council, the High Commissioner for Refugees was noting that the Democratic Republic of the Congo, that violence between men with guns there was so common that no other place on earth is as dangerous for women and children as is the east of that country. So I think I don't know that I have a great answer for you on that one. It sounds like you're better equipped and provided some information where you noted that you're choosing to work outside of the country, working to gain information from inside the country, and then working to publish, I assume, outside the country as well, so that presumably when the government calls you or others journalists treasons or collaborators with rebels, I think, hopefully you're outside the country, but hopefully you've also made sure to, verify the information with other facts. I'm sure it sounds like you've done, or to collaborate with other organizations that can help make sure that your reporting is backed up by big institutions. Often you'll see organizations like Human Rights Watch or Amnesty International have also reported on similar types of instances in other countries. I think it's great to collaborate with them and other organizations like Crisis Group that have big operations and credibility, so can lend credibility and hopefully can deter from some of the negative comments that you may be receiving. But really outstanding that you're working to report on that situation there. I think it's amazing. I see that there's another question about examples of disinformation in Pakistan during the recent election, where the party leader was led by former cricketer Imran Khan was banned from all media platform, and general public doesn't know their symbol through which they can cast the vote. I don't know, Labia, if you wanted to unmute and give a little context of what happened. I don't know that you can, but I think we do see this, I think, with elections worldwide. Candidates can have disproportionate access to media and campaigning, and press freedoms as well as political freedoms often do go hand in hand. Just looking as about effectiveness, perhaps in closing, in our last 20 minutes of transparency and news reporting, goes to some earlier points. Building trust. I think a big way to build trust is disclosing sources and methods of information to help build credibility. So in your reporting, I think sometimes you've seen in large investigations, the reporters will say, as building this story, we spoke to 50 people, 10 from the government, 5 civilians impacted, 2 analysts. So they'll give context about how they went about reporting to sort of build trust with the reader. You can do the same thing in television, in preparing for this video, we were able to get inside and do XYZ and talk to these people so people know how you came about the information that you have. Demonstrating transparency in editorial decisions, I think, helps to foster trust between news organizations and the public. So what you will and won't do, for example, you can say, as a news organization, we've decided not to show these images because we think showing them would lead to XYZ, or we've decided that we need to show you these images because we think it will help accomplish X, Y, and Z. So demonstrating some transparency in the editorial decisions that you're choosing to make as either a news organization or a private journalist. Again, as I noted the point earlier, accountability, error corrections, they happen. You see it even in the most well-established, well-resourced outlets, that you'll see corrections at the bottom that they got the date wrong, they got the name wrong, they got the year wrong. I think, it's just, you have to understand, do the best you can, correct as fast as you can, and then note why and when the correction was made. The correction was made due to a reporting error. The correction was made due to a mistranslation or to an editing error. Be open to scrutiny, be open to external scrutiny, such as fact checking by third parties. I think that can lead to credibility of an organization. Discrediting false information. I think this is very challenging, and to try to transparently address and debunk information with clear evidence and explanations can help to effectively counter false narratives. I think the speed at which some information moves can be very challenging. And again, Maria Ressa has spoken about this, that often, more damaging and false narratives spread at greater speed than truthful and accurate ones. I think also source evaluation can help. So if you're citing someone as an expert, either on television or in your writing or digital stories, clearly explaining the reliability and the credibility of the sources. We've seen this, for example, with aid workers in Gaza, with people working in Sudan or other challenging situations. They can say, this is my 10th conflict that I've worked in, and other conflicts, I've seen this type of stuff. I've never seen anything like this, which helps to sort of provide, their own expertise. So it helps to explain the reliability and credibility of the sources. So if you're quoting somebody, note why you're quoting them. They have their PhD and they've been studying this information for X number of years, or they have a lived experience where they went through this own type of migration themselves. So I think it helps to just add that 1 or 2 lines often when you're citing people in stories, so that audiences know why you chose to speak to them or to use their information in their story. I think fourth, I would say, combating echo chambers can help. So try to do balanced reporting. So transparent presentation of multiple perspectives and sources can sort of try to counteract the echo chambers and provide a fuller picture of the news. I realize how challenging that is. I'm from Arizona. I was there in December into January, and December in Arizona is what we call a swing state. It switches between Republicans and Democrats, and the migration issue is all that you hear about. And there's just a lot of very dangerous and false rhetoric that's in the news space. So it can be very challenging to try to present multiple perspectives. So what is the perspective of the migrants who are choosing to come across? What is the impact of family separation when children have been separated from their parents coming across, to try to counteract some of that very negative and damaging and false information about who the people are that are coming across the border, and also providing, you know, a fuller picture of the news in addition to the problem of the migration at the border. You can talk about, you know, what's driving migration from their home countries, or the policies of the various parties to try to address this. So just to try to present a more balanced picture that can be very difficult when you're up against, you know, large networks repeating the same false information over and over and very loudly. Facilitating fact checking. Often news organizations and individuals can work with fact checkers. I think, again, we see this around elections to try and make the verification process as visible as possible, to try and provide the credibility of the news reports. And they often note how that they're doing it, that this information is based on 90% of exit polling, or this is based on 95, and we don't anticipate that XYZ will happen. So some information about how you've come across the information and its reliability. Sometimes providing access to raw data or other supporting documents can help independent verification and fact check by others. Again, going back to when I used to report on Guantanamo, I would just provide the hyperlinks in my stories to the documents so that all the court cases were embedded into my stories, or other ways that you can do that, or you can hyperlink to raw data from another organization on migration, or raw data from another organization about violence, so that you don't have to, you know, provide all the background yourself. Obviously, it's more challenging to do that if it's just a newspaper on print where you can't have hyperlinks, or television. But you can often say, you know, if we had a guest on for Al Jazeera or CNN, you could say more information is available on their website, so that you can allow the journalist, you can allow via journalists to give an audience more access to supporting material that can help you and help build trust. I think, as we just noted, using new technologies, AI, there have been some detrimental things that have been noted, but it can also be used to help stop disinformation by detecting and flagging misleading content through algorithms that analyze patterns. I think resisting manipulation is very challenging as well. Again, clear attribution, specific sources and individuals. And for example, transparency in funding or disclosing sources. When I used to work in television as a booker, if I was booking a particular person on air, you would often note their background and any conflict of interest they may have. So obviously any speaker on a conflict situation or an official from an international organization might have a particular bias, and you want that stated in advance. That's not saying that their opinions and views are not valuable, but just so the audience understands where they're coming from. You know, served 20 years in the military. So obviously this person is an expert in military strategy, right? But not necessarily an expert on impact on civilians of certain operations, or this person has worked in a capacity as an NGO on the ground in conflict zones, right? So may not be an expert in conflict, in military tactics, but is an expert on the effect of certain operations on the ground. So we always used to, you know, have to provide 2 or 3 lines to make sure that we are explaining to the audience this person's particular expertise, because everybody comes with certain biases. And then I would say, you know, lastly, and then I'll ask you guys if you have questions again, is encouraging media literacy. I think it's, you know, just asking people that, you know, who is funding the story, who is writing the story, what is the ethics of the organization, what can be verified, you know, making it harder for disinformation to take root. You know, media literacy is not something I heard till I was in my mid-30s. So I think we're far behind, but I'm hoping that, you know, starting with a younger audience who can try to, you know, where is this person reporting from? How did they get the money to report this? What are the objectives that they're trying to achieve? Well, how do we know this person is a more neutral and credible? You know, have they written other stories before? I do that now, obviously, whenever I'm looking to speak to any journalist. You know, have they reported before? Where did they report from? What is their experience coming into the situation to speak to you, so that you have a fuller picture of the people that you're working with. I just saw there was another question. In cases of armed conflict, what is the criteria for citing sources? unanimously. Again, I would go back to, I think citing sources anonymously, it goes back to the news value of doing so, right? Is this person the only person that can provide such information? Is the information that they're providing so critical that you need to cite them? Are there other ways to get this information? Is this coming from somebody who's leading a military operation and wants to, leak that news to what is their motivation for speaking to you anonymously? Like, do they want to stop a military operation from going forward and they hope that by you publishing it, they could do that? Or is an anonymous situation somebody that's a victim of terrorism or a victim of wrongful detention? So I think, it depends if you're trying to protect somebody who has an obvious news value, or somebody has such information that it's so vital and credible that it could affect the course of events, and you think that it's necessary for the story, and the story couldn't happen without it. So I think there's a variety of things that you would have to measure there, but news valueness and impact being among the two top. I don't know if there are other questions. I noticed that somebody asked me earlier what I studied. So I wanted to be an architect, but architect was 5 years of school and journalism was 2.5. So I opted for journalism just out of expediency, and because my college funds would be less than if I went to architecture school. I have no regrets, but there was no conscious decision. And then I got an internship straight at CNN while I was still in school. Then I just started from there. So there was no intent to head in this direction. But I do think, and I hope many of you do, that journalism is an incredible way to learn about many different things, depending on, you can be a subject matter expert on particular areas. Like, I've done extensive writing about the Gulf states, so I feel like I have a good understanding about some factors in the Gulf states where I also live, but then also a generalist in the sense that if you're reporting on 2.5 hours of live television a day, that you get to cover, 15, 16 topics in any given day. So it's a nice way just to learn about, elections the world over, or social issues the world over, and also to travel if that's what you're interested in, traveling where stories are happening and being there. I think it's been a great experience for me. And then just to meet extraordinary people the world over. I think I'm pleased to see that so many of you are choosing, hopefully, this career. It's not without its challenges, but I definitely think the rewards are immense. Mushtaba?
Yes, I'm just curious. You mentioned that you worked at Al Jazeera. If you can share your experience at Al Jazeera.
So I worked for Al Jazeera twice, well, 3.5 times, I say. So I used to write for the website. On the website, I wrote sort of on national security issues, global, related to, the war on terrorism, in quote, primarily Guantanamo, as well as prison situations of wrongfully detained persons in the US war on terror in Afghanistan and Pakistan. I had a wonderful experience working for them on those issues, and I do like to think that they led to some small changes that affected individuals who had wrongfully been detained, or at least had been detained without charge. I worked at the Al Jazeera newsroom in Doha, so I was the producer. I put out 2.5 hours of live television a day. I think the Al Jazeera newsroom, in my experience, is extraordinary, and just that there are so many journalists from so many areas of the world, that the available expertise in the newsroom was extraordinary. On my team, I had a producer who went on to be a minister in Somalia, as well as myself. So just the variety of the lived experience and expertise, I think, really contribute to a very strong product. The demands are very high, just that Al Jazeera really does tend to cover the world. And then I did feature programming for Al Jazeera America in the United States. So I just focused on an individual a week who was impacting the world in a variety of different ways, whether it was through the arts, whether it was through politics, through music. So I had a great experience with Al Jazeera. It's got incredible resources and incredible reach, and any network that has a large distribution, it tends to mean that a lot of people read or see the content that you can produce, which is valuable in itself. I had many of the same experiences with CNN, and then I also wrote for a couple of websites as well. I think, big organizations, small organizations, websites, they all have, wonderful and different values. But I've been very fortunate that I've had good experiences in my journalism career.
Thank you.
24-hour news, though, is 24 hours. So.
Can I ask?
Sorry?
Can I ask my question?
Yeah, please.
Okay. I'm a journalist from Lebanon. Lebanon and some countries in Middle East, we are forbidden to communicate with Israelis in this part of this world, which is they are part of Middle East, even though. But as a journalist, not to take part in the story, sometimes I think, between myself and I would like to have your opinion, it's good to have the other side of the story. I mean, the Israeli point of view, but it's forbidden by the law and how to communicate and all this stuff. But in media ethics, if I don't take them into consideration, I wouldn't be taking directly through the law itself of the country a part of with the Palestinians, sometimes because they are part of Hamas also. Some Palestinians are part of Hamas. So if I'm not taking into consideration the victims from the other side as ethically, I'm putting them away.
No, this is why I was saying earlier, it's, we work in a very challenging global media environment as well as national media environment. I worked in Jerusalem, both for the UN and for CNN. So I am aware of the various restrictions that can be involved. And, you do have to be aware of and comply with relevant laws regarding defamation, privacy, national security, as I noted before, as well as laws related to cyber. Sometimes journalists choose to, as I noted before, work around those laws or choose to do news gathering in one country and then send it to another country who can then put it out from there in compliance with laws. So for example, do you do news gathering in Lebanon? Do you do news gathering in surrounding areas? And do you send that then to somebody in London who can compile the reporting? If you're choosing to do it individually, is there a way that you can do it that complies with national laws? And if you're not going to comply with national laws, why? Does it merit it? And can you accomplish the story in the same manner, or do you feel like there are other things that you need to do? It's very challenging, particularly. That's why I always say it's super important to understand the laws in any country that you're working in, particularly related to hate speech and the right to imagery. Particularly, you were noting Lebanon, but many countries have particular laws related to what is deemed
like
insult.
Egypt also is one of the countries, Sudan also, and different countries in the Middle East also.
There are countries too that it's against the legal codes to insult or slander public or elected officials, or to not write in a way in a way that is seen to be undermining the states. So again, I think this goes back to evaluating your risk and the news valueness of what you're doing, and if there are ways that you can do it safely, and if there are ways that you can collaborate with people. But you need to prioritize the safety of yourself, obviously the sources and the colleagues that you're working with. It's very challenging.
Yes, exactly. I still have a question. Can I also? Okay.
Yep.
What do you mean by media ethics? Sometimes I have a debate with colleagues in Middle East. Also, they don't know. They mix the media ethics with the personal ethics of the journalist on his personal life sometimes. So it is mixed. For example, if maybe someone is liberal in his own private life, what has to do this? This has to do with media ethics. Sometimes they take it into consideration in some institution in Middle East.
Well, I think, we all come with personal biases based on, where we were brought up and various other circumstances. But I think media ethics really relies to, ensuring accuracy, fact checking, sensitivity, respect, confidentiality, avoiding harm, impartiality, balance, cultural, regional sensitivity, accountability, transparency, avoiding sensationalism, and things like that. I would say that, which is very different from, what you and I may like to do, or our personal preferences for any one thing. I mean, I think there is a base, human rights standards that should apply universally, which is why we have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, right? Some things are wrong. And that's not a matter of personal biases, right? But, there's universal declarations of human rights that support, basic standards for all humans. But I think media ethics refer to the things that I just noted, and personal biases are different. But making sure that your personal biases don't play into a story, although sometimes, again, it could be relevant. And this is where I think, related to women's health and reproductive systems, which have been in the news lately, right? Then maybe your personal experiences are relevant to the news that you're doing, but then you need to disclose that, right? If you choose to be reporting, for example, on reproductive processes that you yourself may have had an experience with, that may actually make you a better reporter on your story, but then it could help for those reading your story to know what your personal experience was. I don't know if that answers your question.
Thank you very much.
I think we're out of time, Jemra. I don't know if anybody has any questions. I told Jemra I would type up some notes and send them to you, just sort of summarizing how I look at ethics and recapping them, and just some basics on mediation and conflict. I don't know if anybody has any final thoughts. I'm just really pleased to see so many of you from so many different parts of the world, and so engaged, and many of you working in very challenging contexts where there is very little reporting. And so that's really great. We definitely need many more stories in the global media space.
Arika, I see your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question in chat. I said that these days there are reels and shorts where people share some great information, but sometimes these are without links or any references, and sometimes the profile or the account which posts the news or any information is not the first account. So how to get the references for that?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question. That some things look like some people online look like they may not be who they are. I'm not sure if I understood that. I'm sorry.
I have written my question in the chats. If you can read. These days, can I read it again?
Yeah, I see.
These days, there are reels and shorts where people share some great information, but without any link or reference. And sometimes it is not on the first profile, the original profile. How to get the references for that?
I think you have to do cross-reference of information, right? Is this information available elsewhere? What type of information is the person providing? Is it a personal anecdote about an experience that they had? That could be difficult to cross-reference unless it looks like something that happens with some frequency in the place where the person is living. If you can't find the information anywhere about a national story, I would not share it further until I was able to verify it with some greater validity, if it's related to, particularly if it's related to something that could cause harm, like elections, conflict, migration, trafficking. Again, the risk of that often depends on the content that is being shared in the reels and the short. I see that somebody added great tools in there. That's excellent. Thank you. Free tools to teach to verify images and videos. Yeah, that's great. I don't know if anybody has any final questions. Again, I'm really grateful, and it looks like many of you guys are working in very challenging context. So I hope that you have all the support that you need and that you support yourself in ways that you can. Again, my contacts are at the top of the chat. I'm really happy for you guys to reach out in any format. Just when you do send me a text, note that you were part of this JWF webinar so that I can get back to you in that context. And if I can provide you with any other help, please let me know.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jenifer. Let me just share my very short reflections. And in the meantime, this is the last call for any questions or comments. Then we can move on to wrap up the session. Again, appreciations, for sharing your years of expertise in covering sensitive topics, conflicts from all around the world, but with a particular focus on the MENA region, which is one of the most challenging geographies of our contemporary day. And I think in the beginning, you shared very practical and daily practices, and these are very important necessaries that we all should be practicing, like speaking skills, writing skills, and these platforms are in fact serving to create opportunities for professionals to practice such skills as well. Likewise, we have a journalism project where we have journalists in the room already, but if anybody here is a student or about to graduate, we open up our platforms for you to share your blog posts or analysis. So it might be a good start to do publicity on your profile. Just wanted to note that. And last year, we hosted an expert like yourself to speak and cover the tactics of reporting from conflict zones. And I vividly remember him saying that sometimes journalists are falling into the passion and temper of spreading the news with the rush of feelings, and rush of breaking news and everything. But he noted that we need journalists who are alive and free. So your emphasis on safety skills, following up the regulations were, I think, immensely important red flags that we should all be careful, even while reporting from abroad. We are in touch with many exiled journalists, and JWF is particularly working on individual complaints as well, submitted to the variety of UN treaty bodies protecting journalists' rights who are covering news from abroad due to the shrinking space of media in their respective countries. Just like you mentioned, having an extensive knowledge on the national laws is very critically important, because they are quite changing depending on the trajectory of the ruling regime's stance on human rights. For example, recently in Georgia, there was a law passed. In Turkey as well, a package is on the progress right now under the umbrella of identifying journalists and citizen journalists as foreign influence agent, which is a critical crackdown on our individual freedom to express opinion, share resources and everything. But we also see some best practices. For example, I just recently saw the tweet of the Organization for Security and Cooperation noting that Bosnia just withdrew a similar law which was recently passed, but now they're withdrawing it from the foreign agency law. So that is an important takeaway as well. And lastly, I want to emphasize on your point where you also underlined the importance of media literacy, not in terms of conflict as well, but I covered this very important topic during the last Commission on the Status of Women at the United Nations. Media literacy, journalists, media professionals have an immense role in combating domestic violence and violence against women, particularly in oppressive states, in gender apartheid regimes, or in countries where women are being subjected to a variety of forms of violence. This does not have to be a physical one, but domestic, social, economic, workplace, and etc. So we all have important role in combating such stages and establish really gender neutral roles in the societies that we live in. So thank you so much for this fantastic session. And I would like to thank the audience as well, as in the last two sessions, you've been very active with your terrific questions and notes in the chat. So one last call, if anybody has anything to say to Jenifer, a comment, a feedback, or from my teammates as well. If anybody would like to share any last goodbyes or notes, then I'll move on to wrap up the session. Oh, all right. Jenifer, thank you so much. As always, I feel very grateful and lucky to have you on board, to have your expertise. And we definitely look forward for future opportunities to have you again.
Thank you. Before you close the chat, somebody just asked me to drop my information in there. So just give me one more second to put it in there. So that way everybody
Sure.
And really feel free to either connect via WhatsApp, that is my mobile that I gave you, via LinkedIn, if you want to share professional experiences. And as Jenifer noted, I've started sort of just doing main events at the Security Council that are happening sort of on my Instagram if you want to keep up sort of with peace and security issues as well. And then my email is there if you want to connect via email. All formats are good. So please do reach out. Would love to connect with you guys further.
Thank you so much. So everyone, enjoy your weekend. We're going to be back on Monday, same time, 10 a.m. with New York time. We'll have two wonderful speakers, and our topic will be how to combat state-led barriers and in censoring some politically sensitive news. Plus, we'll be speaking on some marketing strategies to disseminate news and visuals out there in the social media platforms. So I look forward to seeing you all, everybody, next Monday, 10 a.m. So take care till then. Bye-bye.